This episode is sponsored by Dr. Chrono by EverHealth, the #1 mobile all-in-one EHR. Built specifically for medical practices, Dr. Chrono includes an integrated feature that powers a seamless payments acceptance experience. Dr. Chrono Payments offers multiple ways for patients to pay as well as insurance credit card processing. As a Dr. Chrono customer, you can easily activate our fully integrated payment solution that will streamline your cash flow and help you get paid anytime from anywhere. Deliver the best patient experience with a fast and easy way to collect payments. Visit drchrono.com/payments. That's drchrono.com/payments to learn more about Dr. Chrono today. Is there a DPC clinician, tech vendor, or industry champion that goes above and beyond to further elevate the DPC movement? Nominate them for a DPC Innovation Award to recognize them for creating traction, embracing innovation, and demonstrating commitment to the movement. DPC Innovation Award winners will be announced and honored at this year's Hint Summit, taking place in Denver, Colorado, September 27th through 28th. Nominate a DPC innovator at summit.hint.com, plus get $50 off your Hint Summit 2024 registration with promo code My DPC Story. Direct primary care is an innovative alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, patients pay their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, build a lasting relationship with their doctor and have their doctor available at their fingertips.
Direct primary care is freedom. The freedom to choose how to get care and the freedom to choose how to give care. In a healthcare system that is floundering with unhappy doctors, unsatisfied patients, quality that is worse than so many countries at costs that are so much more, DPC to me is a beacon of light, a reminder to all of us that we have a choice, and is a perfect blend of the old-fashioned doctor-patient relationship with modern technology. I am Dr. Vasanth Kainkaryam of 4 Elements Direct Primary Care, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Vasanth Kainkaryam completed his undergraduate degree in the biological sciences and in linguistics at Cornell University and went on to pursue his MD at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry. He subsequently trained at Bay State Medical Center Western Campus of Tufts University School of Medicine in both internal medicine and pediatrics, and then went on to pursuing a degree in medical informatics from Northwestern University, focusing on health administration informatics. He has special interests in shared medical appointments, innovative healthcare delivery models, patient education, deaf health, adult survivors of childhood illnesses, and especially the application of technology in healthcare delivery. He carries academic appointments as an assistant clinical professor of medicine at Quinnipiac University Frank H. Schneider School of Medicine, as well as an assistant clinical professor of medicine at UConn School of Medicine. In his prior practices, including Hartford Healthcare, Iora Health, and First Choice Health Centers, where he has held roles as physician and regional medical director, and chief medical officer, respectively, he has had extensive experience in developing shared medical appointments, helping advise development of electronic health records and patient-based communications, and developing telehealth strategies. While at Iora, he also was the director for the Fellowship in Primary Care Leadership and Innovation. He has led very successful site visits by HRSA, the Joint Commission, and the Provider Transformation Network, and has led federal grant applications for innovative educational programs as well. He is a father of 3 daughters ranging from 9 years old to 9 months old, and is a husband to an anesthesiologist. In his spare time, he enjoys writing. His first book was entitled Suprabhatam, loves traveling the world, learning about different cultures and languages, listening to Indian classical music, and has a passion for baking mini cupcakes. He speaks Tamil, Kannada, Hindi, French, and has basic conversational proficiency in American Sign Language and has studied Latin as well. He opened 4 Elements DPC in November of 2019, a day after he left his previous job. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Kainkaryam.
Thanks for having me.
It is wonderful to talk with a fellow parent. And I wanted to start off with that because you are a father of three, as well as a triple board certified doctor in internal medicine, pediatrics, and obesity. And in addition to your qualifications, you have lots of other non-medical related talents, including mini cupcakes. So just to break the ice a little bit for the listeners, can we start there so that the listeners can get to know you? How did you end up having that as a hobby? And what's your favorite flavor?
Years ago, my wife introduced me to Cupcake Wars, and we just got completely hooked. And so we were thinking about, how can we make cupcakes innovative and interesting? And I think a lot of times we all like our desserts, but it's really the portion size. So I was like, what if we make them smaller? So that got us into the whole mini cupcake thing. And then I wanted to bring in some flavors of my culture. So one of the first cupcakes I made was a chai cupcake. And so really brewing authentic Indian chai, turning it into a cupcake, adding some other spices and flavors, and then really experimenting with different types of frostings from your traditional American buttercream to Swiss buttercreams, and adding flavors like saffron and cardamom and just making it interesting. That was really my first cupcake. And so my wife and I have this dream at some point of opening up a little cafe bakery type of thing. We'll see. It's one of those things to have fun things to do, and I bake cupcakes for people's baby showers and for parties. And so, yeah, so far the reception has been good.
That's awesome. And I just love the idea that you are now a DPC doctor doing full DPC, and you're able to incorporate things like that, things that are representative of you and your family and your culture. So thank you so much for opening with that. Now, you have had quite the journey professionally. You've worked at Hartford Health, you've worked at First Choice, and you were also heavily involved in IORA and getting IORA into the community up in the East Coast. So can you share about your journey professionally through all those organizations prior to you opening For Elements?
Yeah. So, I did my internal medicine and pediatrics in Springfield, Massachusetts. So we've lived in Connecticut for quite a while after I finished med school in Rochester and undergrad at Cornell. And then I did what I thought you normally do. It's like, all right, you know what? At the time that I was finishing up, the whole world of private practice got less, and more and more people were getting bought out by health systems. So I figured that's what you do. So I joined a health system. I learned a lot. Within a year and a half, I became the regional medical director. I got to know my C-suite executives very well. They actually they took me on conferences. So here I am, like new attending, going on these conferences with my CEO and COO. And they were really great mentors and really just thinking about healthcare and what to do. And I enjoyed what I did. I was treated very well. So I think unlike some of the other direct primary care docs who may have had some terrible experiences with the traditional healthcare system, I've been lucky I didn't, right? And I think I had great mentors. They were very good to me. So I have zero complaints in terms of how I was treated. But then one day my COO had asked me like, hey, I got to talk to you. And she's like, can you meet me in the office? It was a very cryptic conversation. I was like, oh God, I'm getting fired. And so lo and behold, she was like, we're creating this unique practice where we're creating a direct primary care practice with a company called IORA Health to take care of our employees. And we think you'd be great. And I was like, all right, sure, sounds great. And so I applied for the job, and 7 interviews later, feeling like, I was like, wow, everyone around me is so brilliant. I was given this opportunity to launch this practice. So I've never launched a practice before. I didn't even know the first thing about how do you set up a practice. I was going to be the only doc for a while, but I was like, hey, it sounds cool. Let's do it. So I was hired 2 months before we opened our practice, and that really began to shift my whole thinking. So I got to see what's it like to build a practice that's so innovative. How do you recruit your patients? How do you do things differently? So this was 6 years ago where at that time, we texted our patients, we emailed our patients, we had no copays for our visits. When patients had surgery, I was like, why are you going to come to the office when you just had knee surgery? Let me see you at home. When they were in the hospital, I'd go visit them socially. I would make sure that they knew exactly who I was and what my involvement was. It was the way care should be, right? And I also had a lot of fun with our patients, right? Some of my patients wore wigs, and we joke around and they take their wigs off and make me wear it and take selfies with me. And it was just a cool way of having a relationship with a doctor patient. So that totally transformed my thinking. And I was like, this is the way care should be. And so then I got this opportunity to become the chief medical officer of a large health system. So I went in with this mindset of, all right, now I've learned all these things. I've lived what I thought medicine was going to be like in the future, and let me try to help work it top down and help change healthcare. And then I realized when you're federally funded and you've got rules and you've got all these other things, you really can't do much. And I think we've artificially created the structure where we've limited our own experiences and what we can do. And though I make great people, I learned a ton. I think that was a huge learning curve. I worked really hard, learned a ton. I finally came to a point where I realized, I was asking people to practice medicine in a way I didn't agree with, in a way that I would not want to practice medicine. I decided to quit. I put in my resignation, talked to my wife, gave her a little anxiety attack, and lo and behold, said, I want to go back to the way I learned how to practice medicine and I want to do it my way. Yeah, I'm like, I think there's a lot of people, there's different paths to DPC. So you've got some folks who just come right out of residency. Then you've got some folks who've been in the system for so long and they're so jaded and they come into it. And then, I fall somewhere in between. I don't view the traditional system so terribly. I think that I'm not totally anti-insurance like some folks are. I think there's a place for everything, but I don't think primary care is the place for some of those things, right? So my perspective is different. And I've also, having been in all these various roles, I've learned a lot of different skills. I learned how to interpret state statutes. I learned how do you resolve patient complaints. In my role, I wrote all of our policies for medication management, vaccine administration, infection control. So when I opened up my office this time, I basically tapped on every skill set that I had acquired. And in the end, I had opened a practice before. I had tabled and recruited patients. So in a way, I almost felt this is where everything I have done before has all just come together. And I have tapped on everything everyone has taught me.
Some doctors have different anxieties about different aspects of opening up a practice. With you having that experience through IORA under your belt, what were some of the unknowns that caused anxiety for you?
I think the biggest thing is financially, right? And so to going from a very nice paying C-suite executive job to saying, all right, now I'm going to go to zero, is a big deal. And I think part of it is just knowing what support you have. And luckily, my wife is a physician who has a good income that gave me the flexibility. But I also had to figure out, and we basically, came up with an agreement that, look, she said she'd help hold the fort, but my practice and my investment in my practice has to come from me. And I think that was totally fair. So I got creative. And how do I moonlight? How do I do consulting? How do I generate my own revenue for my practice and not depend on her so that it doesn't affect our family life too much? So I think that's probably the biggest anxiety. And it always is sort of an ongoing fear, right? Where you're like, all right, I hope things continue to work out well. Luckily, I've been blessed. Even my first year, I haven't been in the red, which is nice. And some of it just depends on just people used to ask me once upon a time, right? I wrote a business plan for this practice and everything, and I haven't looked at it since. And I don't want to. 5 years ago, people would say, what's your 5-year plan, 10-year plan? I'd have everything written out. Now I don't. And I feel fine saying that. I'm okay, molding and flexing to what happens. And I think if anything, 2020 has taught all of us that we can make all these plans. But if you can't pivot and you can't learn from what's happening around you, then the plans are pointless. So that to me is probably the biggest thing. Other than that, like a lot of this stuff I've done before. I've worked in a school-based health center for other providers where I did my own CLIA testing. I wiped down my own tables, wiped the chairs. So I learned about that stuff. I've given my own vaccines. I've helped monitor temperatures when the refrigerator was out of range and figuring out how do you transfer from one place to the other. So the skill set is not new. The only thing that was new for me is the finance piece and having the freedom to market the way I want to market.
That said, now that you have 4 Elements, it's been open since 2019. In what ways have you been able to innovate and go beyond what you brought to your practice now that it's fully yours?
I think some of it just depends on what opportunities are there, right? With COVID, many of us have done things such as parking lot COVID swabs. I've gone to people's houses to drop off paperwork. I've had patients who have Parkinson's and they go to physical therapy, but their movement is hard. So I'm like, look, let me just see you while you're at physical therapy. You don't have to make a special trip over to me. I've met people in the community where in Connecticut, I can dispense medications. And so I've met them in common places when it's been difficult for them to come to my office and be like, look, I'm swinging by there anyway. I may as well just give you your medication when I see you. So I've just had freedom to say, you know what, let's get creative. Like the other day, I had patients who come for acupuncture. The weather was beautiful. I'm like, look, do you want the zero gravity chairs out in the sun and have acupuncture while you're getting your vitamin D? And they're like, totally, right? I feel like there's a few things, right? If it's allowed by law, if it's in part of your clinical guidelines, if the patient wants it, and if you can offer it, Those are the only things that guide my decision making.
I just think about what environments you've come from, what administrative roles you've had, and then you just broke it down into what embodies the four elements of your practice. So I wanted to ask, your clinic is called Four Elements Direct Primary Care. How did you come up with the name, and what are those four elements?
That's a great question. And the initial concept came to me when I was doing my certification as a physician executive. We had to give the speech talking about our philosophy of leadership. And then as I was debating for a name for this practice, my wife and I were talking, and I really liked what I had come up with there. And we didn't quite know how to convert it into a name. And then eventually we came up with the Four Elements Direct Primary Care. And the four elements are really what I truly believe in: engagement, education, empowerment, and encouragement. And those really also nod to the stages of change that we see, right? You've got to engage with people first to even get them on board. You have to educate them, because that really builds the foundation of everything that we do, where we learn from each other. You have to empower them to really self-care and help themselves. And then once they're there and they've got the education, they're engaged actively, they feel they can do it and they're confident, then you encourage them to continue along that journey. So it's really, those are the four elements, but the other four elements are really a nod to incorporating integrative modalities and Eastern philosophies of, earth, fire, air, and water. And it has several meanings. And the logo, I love the logo that I had the designer come up with. And the E is very subtle. And then in the E, the two parts of the E are an equal sign, which really then represents equality, right? So in direct primary care, unlike the way people might feel in other practices, everyone is equal to me, right? My patient who is an undocumented immigrant who can't afford any health insurance and only has me is treated the exact same way as my wealthy entrepreneur who wants great care and has all the money in the world. So it's a very level playing field. So to me, it means just so many things. It means just the way I practice. It means, my philosophy. It means the way I care for people. And I could go on, but it has many meanings to me.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you to Spruce Health for supporting the My DPC Story podcast. The ways we communicate have changed dramatically over the past decades, but technology and tools in healthcare have not kept pace. Patients want more access and digital convenience, as well as the ability to text their care teams. Care teams are inundated with more communication and rising expectations, but are still using tools and technology stuck in prior decades. Spruce Health created a solution for the tech-forward DPC practice by creating a communication product designed to serve both the patient and the doctor through intuitive HIPAA-compliant workflows, tagging, scheduled messages, and triage templates ready for use, whether you're on your phone or in the exam room. New users get 20% off for the first 12 months of a paid plan with code MARYAL20. That's MARYAL20. So check out Spruce Health today at sprucehealth.com or check out the link in the show notes. I think that's wonderful. And you mentioned that one of the ways that you have been able to have freedom and innovate is marketing. And when you talk about engaging people, how do you engage folks who are unaware that the model of direct primary care exists?
So I am a part of several chambers of commerce. I sit on the board of directors of my local town chamber of commerce. I've heavily engaged with the town to help them do things such as COVID testing. And, I think there's something to be said about being a part of the community and being visible to your community. So we had last summer, our town, we had heroes parades. We would honor first responders and people throughout. And I sponsored some of those signs that would go on everyone's lawns and say, hey, you know what, you're a hero. So I think a big part of it is community relationships, right? Businesses have to know you're there. People have to know you're there. And not everything is about making money, right? Sometimes it's just about being there for your community, which is why I'm really excited about even giving the COVID vaccine that I've been approved to, right? Like I don't bill insurance, so I don't get any money for all the time that I spend giving COVID vaccines. I do it completely free of my time. I don't get paid for it. But it's the right thing to do. I think there's different levels of marketing. There's sort of intentional marketing, and then there's just some things that just saying, what, just do the right thing. And if people see it and they value what you're doing, then they will come to you. So that just being a part of the community has been very meaningful to me because I really want to bring back that feeling of here I see my doctor in, karate class, or I see my doctor in the grocery store. And you have those conversations where I don't have to run away from my patient saying, oh my God, HIPAA privacy, I can't see you, I can't acknowledge you. We're trained to think that way, right? I was a resident. We were trained to say, some attendings told us, if I see my patient in public, I wouldn't even acknowledge them. And I would tell my patient that right ahead when we met them. I used to follow that. Now I don't anymore. It's a different level of relationship you get in DPC.
I laugh at that because I live in a town of 4,000. And so it's highly unlikely to not see your friends and neighbors, your patients also at the grocery store or at the gas station. So I love that you are in a place where you are comfortable and you are inviting of being in the same environments that your patients are, because at the end of the day, if a patient can't relate to their doctor, I think it makes it a little bit more difficult for when you talk about encouragement and empowering people later on about their health. When I encourage a patient to follow through with things, the better I know them, I feel that the more compliant they are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think some of it's also making yourself vulnerable as a physician. I think a lot of times in 7 to 8 minutes, we can't necessarily tell them who we are. And so when I do my intakes with them, I spend about 1.5 to 2 hours with my patients, just talking and getting to know each other. It's almost like a date. Really, you're trying to see if you're a good fit for each other. And I give them the opportunity and I have the opportunity. And I don't mind sharing with my patients. Just like them, I am subject to the traditional system in so many ways. And I don't mind sharing this, but when I was 17, I was diagnosed with cancer. So I've gone through their side of things. I've seen what it's like to be a patient. I've seen what it's like to look at insurance claims and be like, this wasn't paid. How do I get this paid? And I began to understand insurance when I was 17. And so I get it. And I've lost my dad, through a fluke accident, and what's it like having loss. And so for me, what I find is when I talk to my patients, I search within myself for those things that I can relate to them with. I was telling my niece recently, we were just talking about one of the biggest challenges in primary care is that you have to be able to put yourself in the life of your patient, but you also have to be able to pull yourself back out. And oftentimes when we get trained in empathy and stuff, we're taught to put ourselves in, but then we forget how to pull ourselves back out. And then we carry those emotions with us throughout the day. And I think the beauty of direct primary care is that because you're not in such a high volume practice, you have the space to be able to say, you know what, just between these few minutes, I've carried so much emotional burden. Let me decompress and get myself ready for the next patient, as opposed to just going door to door.
Absolutely. And when you were describing that discussion with your niece, the word time just kept rotating in my head, because you have time with your patients at the moment that they are seeing you, but you also have that time in terms of longevity of the relationship between you and your patient. Because if you know them over a span of 3-4 years, you don't necessarily have that sense of urgency that everything has to be taken care of today.
And it's funny you say that, because I had a new patient who were just doing a quick intro and she was trying to get through everything so fast. And I'm like, relax. I was like, I'm not going anywhere. Even if you forget something, just shoot me a text later. We'll figure it out. It's truly where preventive is over a continuum. It's not episodic. And it takes retraining. She's like, I think I'm just so used to having only 8 minutes that I have everything written down to get through as fast as I can. I was like, let's take it slower. We've got time.
Yeah. And just even thinking about that from the doctor's perspective, there have been so many times where I was rushing through the patients. I'm already behind, apologizing to my patients for being behind. And being in that space had caused me to forget things like to send prescriptions or to call a patient back. And so I'm sure that also because of that, you find yourself more centered in your practice.
I do. And look, worst case scenario, like some very few things in primary care are so urgent. Very few things that we have are have to be done right now. Sure. And it's oftentimes a patient will tell me something and I'll be like, I don't have the answer right now, but let me think about it. And there are times where I'll just sit and stare at the screen thinking. And that's what we're paid for. We're paid to use the knowledge that we have to think, and not just blurt out the first thing that comes to our mind because we're pressed for time. It's the luxury of even be able to say, let me review their labs again. Let me just ponder over it, to be able to come up with something that's informed.
The idea that you're also going along with your 4 elements, educating your patients, and that you're building the trust and you're educating the patients that they can trust you when you say, hey, I might not have the answer today, but I can get back to you on that. And they, as a result, realize more and more, I'm sure, that, oh, yeah, this is very different from the regular type of healthcare that we get in fee for service.
Correct.
Now, your clinic is located in South Windsor, and you also have a second location in Rocky Hill. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And at what point did you get a second location opened?
Pretty early on, it was really just an idea that I was talking to a physical therapy suite. They had some extra space, and I was like, huh, what would it be like to just have a little office inside of it? And they're like, what a cool idea. And it just happened. And so the second site I say is a satellite office. I don't have all the bells and whistles there that I do have here. But once again, what do you truly need as a primary care doc? We're talking like, if you could do a home visit, why can't you have a satellite office that's just one room, right? It's doesn't make sense not to. So that was sort of where that came from with I wanted to flank both sides of the Connecticut River because in Connecticut, there's this thing of people not liking to cross the river. I don't know why, but it's this dividing river right between central Connecticut. It goes up and down, and people just don't like to cross the river for some odd reason. I was like, let me just flank the river on both sides. And that has given me the opportunity to have patients now as far down south as Long Island, actually, and as far north into Massachusetts who will drive and come to my locations because they like my philosophy and I'm accessible on both sides of the river. And it has changed. With DPC, we don't necessarily need a physical footprint. We really just need, it doesn't matter. Our footprint is more flexible. It doesn't matter where you live. And I tell patients, look, I'm not going to drag you in the office every time to see you. There's a lot of stuff we can do remotely. And especially since for me, I'm a big tech proponent and pretty well versed in it, it has changed where my patients come from. And frankly speaking, it's very humbling that someone would even come an hour and a half or 2 hours to see you. And you do your best to get everything done in that one visit because you appreciate and you value that they've come that far for you.
I totally hear you on that. I'm in the same boat, given that I'm in such a remote location. I do have patients coming from an hour and a half. And in the model of DPC, I can see how that's much more respectful for a patient's time because they don't have to, sit in the waiting room and then only get 8 minutes with you. Again, it goes back to that long-term relationship that you can take care of things over the phone and you can make adjustments if you need to meet them halfway or whatever. You can tailor it to whatever works for you and your patient. How do you manage the time between clinics? Do you have certain days at one and certain days at the other, or do you just adjust based on your patient's needs?
So I have loose office hours. I've set a sense of office hours to give myself some sense of control, so I'm not totally haphazard, but I keep it fluid. So part of it is, look, if I need to squeeze in my own primary care patient, I do the best I can. It goes back to the same things. If it works for the patient, if it works for my family, if I can offer it, then I'll try to do it, right? There might be times where it doesn't work for my family, and then I have to say, unfortunately, I can't. But I try to keep things a little fluid. I work one weekend every month because I want my patients to have that access. I keep evening hours because I want them to have that access too as well. So a lot of it's about balance and a lot of it's about flexibility and patients also understanding that I'm trying to go out of my way to help them too as well. And there might be times where, like for my family, it may not work out and I might not be able to. But honestly, so far, everyone has been so gracious. I've seen them earlier than normal. I've seen them later than normal. I've seen them on days I'm not supposed to be in the office, but I'm like, you know what? Don't go anywhere else. Let me come see you. So I think it's really just, it's about value, just valuing each other and valuing the relationship. And I have patients who text me saying, do not look at this text until it's the next day because I know you're with your family, but I want to get it out of my head and get it to you. So it's that freedom on both sides to be able to put it out there, knowing that the other person's going to get to that. And if it's something more time sensitive, you have access. So it doesn't really, there's always that cushion of, I know they're there when I need them.
Going back to earlier when you mentioned that one of the things that caused anxiety before starting the practice was the financial piece. And just knowing that your youngest daughter is about 3 weeks older than my youngest son, do you have a cap on how many patients you want to accept as a solo doctor with your kids being so little and you having two clinics and balancing the time between those two?
As we all sort of map out our DPC business plan, initially I had written it out as 300 to 500 patients, somewhere in between. But interestingly enough, because I'm launching a weight optimization program and I do a bunch of other things as well, I may not need to go to that cap. I'm okay saying, let me actually cap lower, because then I can actually give more attention to the existing patients that I have. So I think the cap is fluid, and it really has to do with what your income needs are. And so if you are able to satisfy your income needs in other ways, you may not need to cap as high. You might even be able to bring that number lower. So I'm pretty fluid. Like I said, this goes back to saying this is an evolving process, and I keep pivoting based on opportunities that come, based on what I can do, based on what my needs are. And I'm totally okay with that.
With you mentioning being fluid and a cap not necessarily being as high as 300 to 500, I want to ask about marketing, because you have some great social media pieces out there. So are you doing all of your marketing by yourself, or do you also get help from a person who focuses only on your marketing?
So all my marketing concepts are my own, right? And frankly speaking, I learned from a lot of DPCs. I follow tons of DPC docs. I'm like, what are they doing? Let me learn. And then some of it's just my own humor, my own sarcasm, a little tongue in cheek. So all the concepts are my own. I do have a graphic design team. Actually, it's a really cool platform where I just subscribe monthly. I pay a flat fee and I get unlimited graphic design work, which is super cool. And they've helped design graphics on my t-shirts and things that I have on sale as part of just fun things to do as part of swag. But in terms of the concepts, they're all my own.
And do you have any other independent contractors or anybody else that helps support you, or have you added anybody as you've grown?
Till date, no. Right now, I will clean my toilets, I mop my floors, I draw the blood, I do the care coordination, I make the phone calls, I return the calls. Pretty much it's me. I'm coming to a point where I might need to bring on someone part-time, and I'm really thinking hard as to what kind of person I want that to be. There's a part of me that wants to support future doctors, and so I might bring in some pre-med students or some foreign grads who are really looking for these clinical experiences as a way of mentoring them. So when I think of employees, and this might just be the way my leadership philosophy is, I don't want someone who just wants to do a job and go. I want someone who I want to help mentor. I want to foster. I want them to come to this having learned something that moves their career forward. So I'm debating philosophically whether I want someone to be here long-term, or whether I want someone to say, here's a defined period of time, and I want you to leave having gained something that you did not have walking in. And my job as your mentor, as your, I guess, a leader, but you really can't lead if you don't have other people to lead in a practice, but that's a whole other story, is to help foster that. And that's just been my outlook with everything, is bringing someone in who is thirsty to learn, wants to learn, has ambitions, and I want to push them along those ambitions.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Have you tried an AI scribe in your clinic? Well, I've tried so many, and I can say Heidi Health is the best AI scribe I have come across thus far. With Heidi Health, I can create unlimited customizable templates for my notes to help me truly cut down on the time I'm spending charting. Template for pediatric well child check? Done. Template for weight loss management? Done. Some of my favorite things I've built into my AI template, beyond the general soap note, are having a list of actionables for our team to take after a patient visit, having the diagnoses listed, and creating an after-visit summary for our patients. Not only have I found Heidi Health to be the most helpful, customizable AI scribe so far, it's also more affordable than most out there. So try Heidi Health today and see how you can harness the power of an AI scribe for your practice. To get an entire month of Heidi Pro free, go to the homepage of mydpcstory.com and click on the Heidi Health ad. And you've been able to work in the residency local to you, correct?
I've had residents come work or shadow with me, correct?
And have you noticed, as you've spent time with the residents, that people are asking more and more about direct primary care practice as a model?
Oh yeah, there's a medical student who reached out to me because he was Googling different models of care, and he found DPC and he found me, and I'm now going to become his capstone mentor. So it's out there. There is more information available. People want to have options. But for me, it goes back to, I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know whether you should live in the traditional system for a period of time before you go into DPC or not. And the reason I say that is because I gained a lot of stuff in that system that made my life as a DPC doc easier. My entire colleagues in the subspecialty fields that I refer to, I gained in that traditional system because I had the volume that I had to interact with them and see them. I got to know the folks in the hospital. I think it depends. If you become a DPC doc in a place where you had residency, then you might be it may be much more advantageous than becoming a DPC doc in a place where you're just at a residency and you don't know anyone there. I think I definitely try to reach out to med schools and residents and say, look, let me set up a rotation, an internship, whatever it might be. Let me help foster the awareness of the younger generation of doctors to say things can be different and I can enjoy what I do and be very satisfied with my career.
And if you are talking with people like residents, are you changing your talk to plant that seed about, hey, come check my practice out and consider targeting your medical school electives and residency electives towards doing DPC?
I offer it. I don't push it. And same thing with my patients. My philosophy generally across the board is I'm a doctor first, businessman second. I mean, at the end of the day, I just want people to know they have choices. I want to share what I'm doing. If it resonates with them, then great. If not, that's fine too. So I'm not a pushy person, right? I think I do this because I believe in it. I'm not doing it to convince anyone that this is the best way. I'm not doing it to convince my patients that they should join my practice. I just do it because I believe in it and let everything else just follow.
With the idea of choices, you mentioned earlier integrative medicine as well as traditional Western medicine. How are you giving your patients choices when it comes to the type of medicine you practice?
I think a lot of it is about enhancing your own skill set. So I got trained in acupuncture for specific medical issues that I treat my patients with. I'm planning on doing more of that. I am doing the fellowship that you introduced me to on point of care ultrasound to be able to offer that to my patients. I'm well networked in the community, and so the weight optimization program that we have has part of it clinical hypnosis built in. It has naturopathic medicine built in. It has personal training built in. I've had patients who have referred to hypnosis. I've had patients who have referred to shamanic energy healing. And so much of it is depending on what your patient wants. And so if a patient comes into me and says, I believe in energy medicine and that's a big component of it, I'm not going to dismiss them and say, that's out of my realm. I have nothing to offer you, right? At the end of the day, there's two things. I tell my patients, I'm your doctor, but I'm also your guide in using the healthcare system. And if I don't know about something, you know what? I better learn about it. I did a crash course in CBD because I had so many questions on CBD that I got to learn about this. Supplements. So they don't teach us about supplements in medical school. So I had to learn about it. I had to ask my friends who live that life, who I trust, to say, hey, what brand is better than the other? How do you think about what supplements you use or not? I view myself as needing to know a lot about what's out there and knowing the risks and the benefits of it so that if my patient asks, at least I can say, look, there could be some risks to this, but it's your choice. Or there aren't any risks to doing Tai Chi, for example, right? There was a study a few years ago that 12 weeks of Tai Chi was non-inferior to 12 weeks of physical therapy. So then if you got someone who's got some stress or for knee osteoarthritis rather, so for someone who's got some stress and anxiety, maybe you consider some Tai Chi. Maybe that'll help you with your arthritis, but it'll also help you with your stress, right? Can you hit multiple things with one intervention? It's just being open to thinking about it, looking at the literature, being critical of it, looking at what could be harmful, and then presenting all that to your patients. Ultimately, it's their choice, right? If you're the type of doctor who is like, I won't even entertain this or listen to it, they're going to go on their own. You're not going to know what supplements they're on. There could be interactions and things could happen. But if they view you as a safe person to share what they're going to do, then it's a different level of relationship and you have more information to help them.
I definitely agree with that. I find that in my older patients, especially when I started out, it was very much, what do you want me to do? Was was their question to me. And as time has gone on, it's been very much more, okay, so I hear you're giving me these options. Let me think about it.
I think what you said is really important and it also depends on the patient, right? So some patients I'll talk to when I meet, and this is what I do in the meet and greet. I ask them, how do you learn? What kind of person are you? Do you like things directly or not? And some patients have told me up front, you're the doc. I just want you to tell me what to do. Other patients like choices. So part of it is being able to say, who is this person? What is their way of receiving information? And how do I give information? For me, this goes back to that linguistics piece of it. So I love linguistics. It was one of my undergraduate majors. And linguistics is all about breaking down communication. How is communication constructed? How is it articulated? How does it transmit? How is it received? And how is it reconstructed in the brain? We do that with language all the time, right? We use it as a tool to convey ideas. And so as a communicator, you always have to think of, well, how is the other person receiving this information? So even with choice, for some people, too many choices is too much. For some people, they just want it direct. For some people, it needs to be softer. And I kid you not, I ask my patients during these interviews when I meet them, are you the type of person who wants to be told things directly? Or are you the type of person who needs to have a gentler hand in giving you information? Because it helps me give them better care. But you can't do that in a regular traditional system. And even to the point where when I first meet a patient, one of my first questions is, and I tell them, I'm not trying to get all shrink on you, but who are you? Right? I open up with, tell me more about who you are. And I let them guide me in that journey, because it begins to tell me, number one, who do they identify themselves as? What are the key events in their life that have made them who they are? And what are the things that are on top of their mind? It's really about that, bringing everything from motivational interviewing to psychology to subconscious, and bringing all that into the realm of primary care to say, if I am that big picture person in your life, I need to be able to see the big picture.
And I just want to go back to your experience at Iora. I know that they have a model where there's different people playing different roles. There are the people who can help out with mental health separate from the doctor, and other roles that exist there. But for you, when you decided to do DPC, but under 4 Elements and not under a corporation like Iora, did you crave that ability to wear all of those hats and to be able to provide all of those services for your patient yourself?
As much as I can, right? I think I like owning the relationship with the patient. I think it depends on who wants to own that. In some of the corporations, it's really a health coach or someone else who may own that relationship. I enjoy owning that relationship. So I really wanted that. But I also refer out, right? I'm not going to pretend to be a therapist. But at least I can offer them as much as I can. Motivational interview, everything. I learned a ton at Iora, and I carry that with me all the time. Every interaction with my patients, it goes back to skills that I've learned there, that I've watched the fantastic social worker who is a part of our team. And Karen, I might normally not call you out, but I'm going to call you out because I think you're super awesome. So, hey, Karen. So all these things, skills, you bring them into what you do, and your patients feel the difference, and they know you care because you're spending the time asking them.
When it comes to asking your patients what type of care they prefer, when it comes to practicing acupuncture, when it comes to practicing with use of CBD, I want to ask, because I'm in California and you're in Connecticut, does your malpractice change if you are doing alternative medicine in terms of cost for malpractice coverage?
It depends, right? There's so much that's going more and more in the scope of primary care, but I always let them know what I'm doing. And yeah, some things are going to change. If you want to add some aesthetic medicine to your practice, like I do, yeah, there's going to be some changes. But honestly speaking, we're primary care, right? We're not doing major procedures. And it's a low volume primary care practice, right? So the number of people we interact on a yearly basis is significantly lower, and it's relationship based, and your patients always have a chance to communicate with you. There's no barriers that are unnecessary. It does, but it really doesn't, not significantly.
And for those people who might be wanting to practice in Connecticut specifically, are there any particular issues in the state of Connecticut when it comes to DPC that are restrictive that you run into?
Connecticut doesn't have formal DPC law like some other states. And so you really have to know your statutes. And I think that's, once again, the lessons I learned from my chief medical officer role is I ran risk management, right? So I ran risk management. I learned the statutes. I learned the grievances. And so that's where I wear that hat, and I have a fantastic team of lawyers. I do. But when I approach them, I'm not approaching them from scratch. I'm doing all the research ahead, saying, this is where my conclusion has led me to this question. And do you agree with the answer or not? Connecticut, in many ways, while in so many ratings, is not one of the best states at all to practice medicine. For DPC, it's not too bad, right? In Connecticut, as a physician, I can dispense meds under my physician license. You have to follow every single line of your statutes to do that, which is a lot of work, but you can. So a lot of it depends on how much work do you want to do. Many DPC docs don't offer meds or labs or that kind of stuff. It's just way too much work. But I do, because to me, I've already thought through a lot of those things before and I have a good understanding of it that I don't mind doing it. Like I said, so much of it depends on what experience you carry with you and what you can tap on.
If you could have anything in your practice, what would you envision that complete picture to be? And could you ever attain that complete picture of what Four Elements looks like to you?
It's pretty hard to say when you're pretty darn happy with what you're doing. I think, do I have ambitions? Yeah. Do I have a clear sense of what they look like? Absolutely not. Years ago, when I when I was leaving my job, my last job, my admin assistant at that time, Lisa, she was fantastic to work with. She gave me a picture that reminded me of something I'd seen many years called ikigai that I had stared at for months before I decided to do this. And it's really where four things come together, where they describe what you're good at, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what drives you, what makes you happy. So it's where your vocation, your mission, your passion, and your profession all come together. That's your ikigai. And so everything I do, I keep referencing back to that, saying, am I following that true north? Am I following that true purpose? And sometimes as a business, right, you create a strategy based on what you want, but it might not be what your community needs. You might do something because you're good at it, but it might not be what's going to generate revenue. It's about balance. It's about finding those things where all of these things come together. So anything I do or anything I try to offer or anything I look ahead at, it really is from this. So it's hard for me to create a vision for myself when I don't know what my community needs. And so oftentimes I think as businesses, right, you're really just focusing on one of those items or what's going to generate us revenue, irrespective of whether it makes us happy or not. I've given away all of those concepts. And I always go back to that ikigai. If it resonates with my ikigai, then I will do it. If it does not, then I don't. And that's really the one true north that I follow.
That's really wonderful. And I hope that, especially for those people who are in medical school and residency, that they really take that to heart as they're, learning to carve out what works for them. And I also hope that it's inspiring for those doctors who have been in practice and who are looking for a change, or even looking how to change their DPC in just a slight way that aligns more with their ikigai. Now, you mentioned that you like using tech and tools in your practice. So I want to ask, can you share any really helpful tech or tools that you use in addition to what you've mentioned?
Right now, the software that I use is fantastic, right? Everything talks to each other. It's beautiful. My texting, my emailing, all that other stuff. Right now, a lot of the stuff I use is primarily software based. I've also explored other softwares to give my patients. For example, we did a challenge in November, a walking challenge, actually, where it was using your phone and your Apple Watch based on, it's called the zombie outbreak, where the steps that you took, right? So number one, there's this big outbreak of zombies. Number two, you have to escape them. You're a team, and the number of steps you take is divided among your team to move your team forward as you're trying to escape these zombies from attacking you. And it was fun. So we were using our Apple Watches and stuff. I opened it up to the community, my patients. And so every night we'd look at, oh my God, we're getting closer. Who's going to start running and walking steps? And it motivated all of us to stay active. And we felt like we were doing it as a team, as a community. So that's just one example of what you can do by saying, hey, let me engage my community and my patients to say, let's stay active together, but use gamification as part of it. So that's one of the things that we did. So like that, there's a lot, right? I've always been talking to some of these companies that are developing tech for remote examinations of patients and stuff. So I'm pretty much always on the lookout for the latest thing in technology that's coming across, but only things that add value to my patients and not things that will deter from it. And yeah, so I think the gamification, honestly, I think is tons of fun. And we're going to do another round of it at some point. But yeah, it's just thinking out of the box a little bit, seeing what's out there.
Especially now during the pandemic, that the idea of gamification and just getting people involved in ways that are social when it's not the easiest thing to be social like we used to be. I think that's really wonderful and really innovative. In December of 2020, you gave a TED Talk about direct primary care. And I wanted to ask, how did that opportunity fall into your lap? And what was your experience with that?
The idea crossed my mind when one of my patients, I saw one of their TED Talks, and I was like, this is interesting. And then I had seen, I think there's two or three other DPC docs who've given TED Talks in various parts of the country. But I wanted to share a talk that had two pieces to it. One is the logical piece that is about data, numbers, costs, statistics. And the other was the story, the emotional piece. Because to me, that is where I arrived at DPC. It made logical sense. It made that you look at the numbers and you're like, of course. And the other piece is it made emotional sense. So I wanted to give a talk that combined both of those to an audience. And I thought about, you know what, maybe the TED Talk is a great chance to do it. So I had applied, and I think there was about 140 applicants in the area here in Connecticut, and 8 of us were chosen. And it was a 6 to 7 month journey. I'd always look at TED speakers. I'm like, how are you so polished? How are things so beautiful? And then I realized, wow, it just doesn't happen. It's a lot of work. And luckily, I had a fantastic TED coach. We're all assigned a TED coach. And my TED coach happened to also have been in a prior life of his, a TED Talk organizer himself. So he came with a very different perspective and was just so great to work with. Sam, I'm just throwing out names here all left and right here, but I'm going to. And I learned a ton. He was so supportive. And the way the talk started off to the way it ended was totally different, but I'm very happy with the way it came out.
Yeah. And for the listeners, the Dr. Kainkaryam's TED Talk is on the blog. So if you visit My DPC Story and go to his page, you can see it there. But you do absolutely weave, starting from your wife and you having the debate about the kidney stones to giving the hard facts about healthcare in the United States, to basically ending what I felt in inspiration in terms of leaving a person wanting the type of care that is DPC. I think you did a beautiful job.
Thank you.
I want to go back to the fact that you are a father of 3, you're a husband, you have a practice that has 2 physical locations. How are you able to balance your professional life with your non-professional life?
So that's a great question. And I think the honest answer right now is that it is not balanced, right? And I don't expect it to be, right? Anytime you're starting a business, and what everyone has told me, and I totally agree with, right? You don't work less, you might actually work more, but the difference is you feel more value in the work you're doing, and you're working because you choose to do it. It's all about the choice. And yeah, so I'm married to a physician who is very successful. She's a partner in her anesthesia practice. She's a director of regional anesthesia for the orthopedic hospital that she's part of. So she's a very successful woman who, being an anesthesiologist, has to be out of the house by 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. So it is very difficult. And then you begin to think about, how do you break up your time? When do you get stuff done? What expectations do you set for your parents? Do I have discussions with her periodically about how much I'm on my laptop and phone doing things? I totally do. Do I get scolded? I totally do. But it's good to have that person keeping you in check, right? Because I think as any business and anything, you can keep diving into it and lose yourself. And, it's important to have that person to say, whoa, do you really be wanting to do this, or do you want to do something else right now? So it's hard. We, with 3 kids, we're like yourself. There are those few of us who probably have a diagnosis that we haven't yet labeled, who've decided to have a child during a pandemic. So it definitely keeps things interesting. Luckily, we have help right now. We've had live-in nannies before. And honestly, a lot of it is asking other DPC docs who have done things such as giving up their houses and their cars and stuff to pursue this. And it depends on where you are with your life. Could I have done that when I was single? Sure. Could I have dedicated so much time to build a practice working 24/7 when I didn't have 3 kids? Totally. So you've got to ask other people to say, what are you doing? You go into them for support. You share the days that are hard, but you also have more control, right? If I want to go to my kids' conferences and stuff, I just block off that point in my schedule. I might work later to catch up, but I do, right? And with many of us DPC docs, we also have other jobs. I do moonlight for the financial piece until my sort of home finances are fine, that I don't need to. But the reality is that those of us who do direct primary care probably work a lot, probably work many jobs. But it's because of that true north, because you're doing this because you believe in it and you're not afraid of working hard. But you always need that person to keep you in check, to say, Are you going a little too much right now that you have to back off and give yourself some time? We're all guilty of it. I tell that to my patients all the time. You got to have your me time. And yeah, even though I'm a doctor, I do need someone to tell me, like, you got to have your me time.
I'm sure that many, if not everybody, can relate to that in terms of making sure that you're taking care of yourself is such an important thing if you want to thrive in as a direct primary care doctor. So I want to ask, do you have any examples that you can give where you've created hard stops in your schedule to say, I will only do this activity for X amount of time, or any examples where you can inspire others to potentially change their way of handling the overwhelm that can come with practicing?
So one of it is working one weekend a month, because that gives me that flexibility during the weekdays to say, I'm not going to do this. I do moonlight, sometimes working overnight in the hospital from 4 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. And so I block my schedule that day to give myself some post-call time off to sleep if I didn't get much sleep and that kind of stuff. Some days I close my clinic early, and it's a hard stop because those are the days I go pick up my kids from school and hang out with them. Part of it is, right, it's just you create your style. I don't book so far out. I keep reminders and I book as things get closer so that I have more freedom in my schedule and don't have to keep telling my patients I'm canceling. So a lot of it is just depending on how you design your practice, your workflows, and how you give yourself that flexibility. There are days I work from home. There's days I say, you know what, I have a bunch of patients who primarily are just telehealth. So let me just block off the rest of that afternoon and catch up from home. And if they need to see me, they can see me virtually. If not, if it really needs to be in person, we'll figure it out. So it's about that. I've got a plan, but I'm flexible.
And how far in advance are you scheduling patient appointments?
I typically try not to schedule more than a month, really. I think it's, if they really feel like they want an appointment on hand, sure. But I have auto reminding text messages to go to them. So there's no way they can forget, because it automatically will go to them, go to me saying, hey, this is a preset reminder. You're due for an appointment for blah, blah, blah. So it's like, this goes back to technology. It's there. We just have to use it in a way that makes it easy for all of us.
For those who are listening and wish to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you after this podcast?
Yeah, so you can always text me at my work number, 860-469-5646, or just shoot me an email at info@4elementsdpc.com. I love helping people, right? I've had, tons of people reach out, even just shadow, learn more, have conversations. I think we've got to inspire other docs and residents and folks just to say, look, there's a better path. It may not be for you. A different model might be better for you, whether it's a PACE type of model if you're a geriatrician, or whether it's concierge medicine if you still want to take insurance, or whether it's a micro practice traditional model. Part of it is just being aware that all of these exist and finding what resonates with you. And DPC isn't the only thing out there, right? This is one of the things out there. Those of us who do it, do we believe it's the best thing for us and our patients? Yes, but it might not be the best thing for you if you're listening. So the only thing you can do is just learn, absorb yourself in every opportunity. Just a quick sideline. When I was a medical student, my rotation for one of my clinical experiences was with this doc who, at that point, I didn't know it was called a micropractice, right? We're talking back in 2005-ish, where in Rochester, New York, he had a small practice. His wife was his nurse. He did everything. He had hour-long appointments with all of his patients. She did his billing. He only saw 8 patients a day. He had full control over what he did. And that was in 2005. And so I still remember that, because I remember how happy he was as a doctor and how satisfied he was professionally. It was a very small office, no fancy equipment, no fancy technology, but the essence of that doctor-patient relationship was there. So if you're listening, while we're talking a lot about DPC, learn about everything that's out there and choose the one that resonates with you the best.
Going back to 4 Elements, people who are listening are definitely engaging, and you've educated people on your experience, but also have given resources and things to think about for other people who might be interested in DPC. And I definitely would say those tools are also empowering. And for encouragement, again, Dr. Kainkaryam has shared his information, but there's also so many doctors out there who love to also mentor. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Thank you so much for all you do. And it was such a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
Next week is our 50th episode. So look forward to hearing from Dr. R.J. Heck and Dr. Aaron Kiesel of St. Luke's Family Practice in Modesto, California. If you like what you heard today, please leave a review and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tell your friends too. For more information on this episode and much more, please visit mydpcstory.com. Also, for the latest in DPC news, check out dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Concepcion.